Her mother died after her husband ordered the breathing tube removed, and Eleanor Vance knew she wanted him to die for it. In the circles of New York's dynastic families, there was an unwritten rule: couples in marriages of alliance were free to play their own games. But whatever you bought for your mistress, you had to buy for the woman at home, too. Julian Sterling was a man of particular principles, so even after the Vance family went bankrupt, he strictly adhered to that rule, multiplied by 100, to give Eleanor the respect she was supposedly due. If the Canary's card had $100,000 a month for spending money, then Eleanor's account was unshakably credited with $10 million. He had just sent his canary $1 million in jewels, and in turn, he burned a fortune at auction to deliver a $100 million antique emerald ring to Eleanor. The society wives, accustomed to the debauchery of their husbands, would sigh at the tumultuous, citywide spectacle of Eleanor and Julian's relationship. Yet they couldn't help but advise her to learn to be content. Of course, Eleanor was content. That was why she waited until the day Julian publicly gifted his canary a nearly worthless house in the suburbs. It was only then, as she accepted the deed to the One North Shore villa from his hand, that she casually asked him, "I'm suddenly finding this a bit tiresome. How about we get a divorce?" Julian Sterling was on his tablet, picking out a gift for Chloe Reed's 23rd birthday. He didn't even look up at Eleanor's words. "The house I gave to Chloe isn't worth much, less than $700,000 with the agent fees included. The One North Shore villa in your hand is in the best location in the city. You're not getting a bad deal. Eleanor, I still dote on you the most." His words were light and nonchalant, yet they almost made Eleanor's eyes burn red. Julian was right. In their 7 years of marriage, he had indeed doted on her the most. Chloe's card had $100,000 a month for spending money, so Eleanor's account was unshakably credited with $10 million. He had just given Chloe $1 million in jewels, and in turn, he burned a fortune at auction to deliver a $100 million antique emerald ring to Eleanor. But that $10 million was just a fixed monthly disbursement from the Sterling Family Trust. And as for the emerald ring, Julian hadn't even been present at the auction. He had simply told the butler to see to it. Meanwhile, Chloe had only to mention she was hungry and craved seafood congee, and the man would personally enter the kitchen, burning 2 pots in the process. Her friends tried to persuade her, "Eleanor, you have money and status now. All Julian is doing is keeping a young girl on the side, and he hasn't mistreated you. Don't be ungrateful for the blessings you have. That's right, Eleanor. Your father is dead, your mother is a vegetable, and Julian is still willing to have you. You should be content." Eleanor wanted to be content, but she could never forget how, when they first got together, he had lit up half the city's sky with fireworks for her. She couldn't forget when the Vance family went bankrupt and she, not wanting to drag him down, had insisted on breaking up. The man had waited for her in the pouring rain, his eyes completely red. He had said, "Eleanor Vance, you're my life, Julian Sterling's life. I can't live without you." Now, 7 years later, Eleanor brought up divorce. Julian was nonchalant, merely tossing out a line, "Chloe's birthday is just around the corner. Be sensible and don't make a scene at a time like this." A sourness stung her nose, and Eleanor pulled out the divorce agreement she had prepared long ago, forcing a relaxed tone. "Sign it. Sign it and I won't make a scene." She thought Julian would fly into a rage. Or maybe, he would snatch the papers from her hand, tear them to shreds, and say with fury, "Eleanor Vance, don't you dream of it. I won't let you leave me." But she never expected that Julian would only glance at her before flipping directly to the last page of the document. He signed his name as he spoke. "Remember what you said. I sign, and you stop making trouble." Eleanor nodded, her voice as light as a cloud. "I remember. No more trouble." Now, all that remained between them was a short, 30-day cooling-off period. On the first day after the signing, Eleanor went to the hospital. On the way, she scrolled past Chloe Reed's social media post. The picture was of a rented apartment. On a dusty green sofa, Chloe's bare legs were draped over Julian's lap as she flashed a peace sign at the camera. The caption read, "I want to be a part of your past, too." The year the Vance family went bankrupt, Eleanor was a junior in college. Her father couldn't accept reality and jumped from a building to his death. Her mother was pushed down a flight of stairs by debt collectors and was left a vegetable. Overnight, Eleanor was abandoned by the world, cast onto the streets with the few belongings she had left. On the third night of sleeping in a hospital corridor, Julian, having had a massive fight with his family, sold everything of value he owned and found her. With $18,000 in his pocket. He said, "Eleanor Vance, now I'm homeless, Just like you. Eleanor Vance, can you take pity on me and let me wander with you? Eleanor was stunned, then collapsed into Julian's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She called him the biggest fool in the entire world. Julian frantically wiped away her tears, smiling as he did so. Yes, in front of Eleanor Vance, Julian Sterling will always be the biggest fool. They used $8,000 to rent a small, 400-square-foot apartment for half a year. With another $3,000, they turned the place into a home. Eleanor would clumsily chop vegetables to make Julian his favorite tomato and egg noodles. Julian would exasperatedly scoop Eleanor into his arms, scolding her for walking on the cold floor without shoes again. Even his marriage proposal took place in this very apartment. Julian, his status as the Sterling heir restored, pulled Eleanor into a spin in the middle of the room and swore, "This apartment will only ever belong to Eleanor Vance." Now, a simple "I want to participate" from Chloe, and he had forgotten everything. A tear traced a path down her cheek, only to be briskly wiped away. Eleanor took a deep breath and, under Chloe's post, she liked and commented, "Sad smiley, the things I no longer want are a perfect gift for you." When she refreshed the page, the post was gone, but an accusatory call from Julian came through, bristling with anger. "Eleanor Vance, what kind of fit are you throwing in broad daylight? You made Chloe cry. I don't care where you are, get over here right now and apologize to her. Otherwise, you can forget about your mother's medical bills." At his words, Eleanor couldn't help but laugh out loud. 7 years ago, when she had stubbornly refused financial help from the Sterling family and insisted on paying her mother's medical expenses herself, Julian had gripped her hand, his face flushed with anger. "Eleanor Vance, she's my mother, too." But now, because Chloe cried, he was threatening to cut off her mother's chance to live. Her hand holding the phone trembled slightly as Eleanor gave a simple reply, "Fine." "What?" Julian frowned, thinking he had misheard. Eleanor took a deep breath, her voice composed and proud. "My mother's medical bills, I can pay for them myself." In the 7 years since marrying into the Sterling family, Eleanor had never given up her work. She was now a designer with a small but significant reputation in the country. Even without the Sterlings, she could afford the medical fees. The breathing on the other end of the line quickened, and Julian laughed, a sound laced with fury. "Fine. You've got guts." The call disconnected, and Eleanor arrived at the hospital. Just as she stepped out of the elevator, she saw her mother's attending physician rushing toward the room. Her heart leaped into her throat, and Eleanor quickly followed. The hospital director stopped her, his face etched with worry. "Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Sterling just informed us. He has forbidden any hospital under the Sterling corporate umbrella from treating your mother. If you can't convince Mr. Sterling to change his mind within the hour, we will be forced to remove your mother from the premises." "What?" Eleanor's face went white. She immediately tried calling Julian, but no one answered. She sent texts, but there was no reply. In the end, she could only let out a bitter laugh as she went downstairs and hurried to the little home Julian shared with Chloe Reed. Before she even stepped through the door, she could hear their playful voices from inside. "Julian, darling, are you sure this will work? What if Eleanor just moves her aunt to another hospital? Then you won't have any leverage over her, will you?" Chloe batted her eyelashes, her tone innocently sweet. Julian's voice was lazy. "She wouldn't dare. Everyone in the Sterling family knows the most important thing to her is that old hag. If I didn't have her mother in my hands, how could I be with you so openly? She'll back down." So this was why Julian's heart had changed. Because he had leverage, he could be Sai Wu Jidan, without scruple. Chloe giggled, then, as if thinking of something else, she tested the waters. "But Julian, darling, that is Eleanor's mother, after all. Isn't this a little too cruel?" Julian raised an eyebrow, the metal of his watch band glinting coldly under the light. "Just the thought of having knelt to a living corpse back then makes me sick to my stomach." Eleanor stood outside the door, feeling as if the blood in her veins had turned to ice. The kneeling Julian spoke of was on their wedding day. Everyone had said her mother was bad luck, a burden to the family even on her deathbed. Only Julian, his face dark, had pushed aside everyone who tried to stop him, insisting on pulling Eleanor to the hospital to kneel before her mother's comatose form. "Mom, don't you worry. I will take good care of Eleanor. I will make her the happiest woman in the world. Mom, you have to keep living. As long as I'm here, I will never let you or Eleanor suffer any injustice." It turned out those vows had an expiration date, just 7 years. Her heart felt as if a piece had been brutally gouged out. Eleanor opened her mouth to speak several times, But the tears fell first, so this is what extreme pain felt like. Wiping her tears, Eleanor pushed open the door. A glass shattered at her feet as Julian, his legs crossed and an arm around Chloe, sneered at her. Weren't you so full of guts? What are you doing here? Restore my mother's medical care. I'll do anything you ask. Eleanor lowered her gaze. As still as a pool of stagnant water, Julian scoffed, his pleasant voice echoing in the room. All right. Since you said it, let's start by having you apologize to Chloe. Fine. Eleanor agreed immediately, without hesitation, but Chloe wasn't satisfied. She pouted, feigning a childlike innocence as she whined, "This doesn't feel sincere at all. I want it like in the movies, where she has to kneel and apologize." A flicker of interest lit up Julian's eyes. "Chloe's right. Eleanor, you're not showing any sincerity. How can I help you if you're not sincere? Hurry up. Kneel and apologize to Chloe." After speaking, he shifted his position, watching Eleanor with keen interest, anticipating her reaction. Eleanor knew Julian just wanted to see her flustered and helpless. Just like at their friend's wedding last time, he had been notified well in advance that there would be press. Yet Julian still kissed Chloe passionately in front of the cameras. He left Eleanor alone to face the barrage of media frenzy afterward. He had his justification ready. "Chloe is timid. She gets startled by the media. You're different. You're used to it." Because she was used to it, Eleanor lost the right to say no. Though her heart was bleeding, she could only maintain a facade of detached calm. Just like now, facing the expectant, mocking gazes of Julian and Chloe, she simply set down her handbag. Then, with a thud, she knelt. Shards of glass embedded themselves in her knees, blood pooling on the floor. Yet Eleanor seemed not to feel it, her voice soft as she spoke. "Miss Reed, I'm sorry." Julian froze, almost instinctively pushing the woman in his arms away to help Eleanor up before he could touch her. He heard Chloe cry out, "Julian, darling, I'm getting dizzy. I'm afraid of blood." Julian stopped, then swept Chloe into his arms and rushed toward the hospital. Eleanor tried to follow, but her knees gave way and she fell to the ground, the glass shards digging deeper. As if numb to the pain, she reached out, desperately grabbing the corner of his jacket. "Julian, my mother's medical care." "Eleanor." Julian cut her off. "How can you be so selfish? Can't you see Chloe has practically fainted? And you're still only thinking about your living dead mother. Let me tell you, if anything happens to Chloe today, you and that mother of yours will pay the price." With that, he kicked Eleanor's hand away and hurried off. He left only Eleanor, watching his departing back in despair. Julian Sterling, I truly loved the wrong man. After gathering her strength for a moment, Eleanor dialed for an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly. After a simple bandaging, Eleanor went straight to her mother's hospital room. As she entered, she saw the head nurse preparing to remove her mother's oxygen tube. "Stop. All of you, stop. I am Julian Sterling's wife. This is our family's hospital. Who gave you permission to touch my mother?" Eleanor bit her lip until it bled, her voice sharp and severe. The head nurse looked troubled. "Mrs. Sterling, this order came directly from Mr. Sterling himself. We don't dare to defy it. Perhaps you could try discussing it with Mr. Sterling again." The call connected quickly, and Julian's impatient voice came through first. "Now what?" Eleanor sniffled, her voice trembling slightly. "Julian, didn't you say you'd spare my mom if I knelt? They're about to remove her oxygen tube now. Can you please?" "No." Julian cut her off coldly. "Even though Chloe wasn't hurt this time, I'm still very dissatisfied with your attitude. Don't worry, I've asked. It's just removing a tube. Your mother won't die that easily." "But she's brain dead," the doctor said. Julian frowned, not wanting to hear any more. "What the doctor says doesn't matter. I have to get Chloe to sleep." Hanging up. The phone disconnected abruptly. The head nurse gave a helpless shrug and removed her mother's ventilator. Her mother's heartbeat immediately sent out a rapid, desperate alarm. "A brain-dead patient can only be kept alive by a ventilator. No, don't." Eleanor was held back tightly by the medical staff, forced to watch as her own mother trembled and convulsed on the bed before finally becoming still. By the time the doctor confirmed her death, no more than 3 minutes had passed. In 3 minutes, Eleanor lost her last living relative in the world. And the chief culprit was Julian Sterling, the man who had once promised to take care of her for a lifetime. That moment, Chloe Reed's social media updated with a picture of a pregnancy test report. "Congratulations to a certain someone on becoming a dad. Catherine Sterling was the first to like the post. See, Chloe is amazing, pregnant after just a few tries. Not like someone else, a hen that can't even lay an egg. Have Julian bring you home for dinner next week. Chloe replied with a shy emoji. Eleanor curled her lip. Compared to her, they seemed more like a real mother and daughter-in-law. Tears stained her mother's death certificate as Eleanor sat alone in the morgue until dawn. There were still 28 days until her divorce from Julian became final. In the days that followed, Eleanor single-handedly managed her mother's funeral arrangements. The viewing, the cremation, the burial. The entire process took 7 days. In those 7 days, Julian never once returned home. Chloe's social media, however, was updated with clockwork precision. Julian had accompanied her to a prenatal check. Julian had helped her pick out a crib. Julian had prayed for a protective charm for her and the baby. All the things Eleanor and Julian had once dreamed of doing together, Julian was now doing with Chloe. On the 9th day of the divorce cooling-off period, Julian, breaking his silence, sent her a barrage of messages, each one a question. Where did you take your mother? I was just messing with you. Do you really have to hide your mom away? My mother is right, you're just spoiled. Bring your mother back to the hospital at once. Don't make her suffer just because you're fighting with me. Eleanor sent him only one reply, not necessary. Those 2 words were enough to make Julian rush back to the villa that night, gripping Eleanor's hand with his teeth clenched. What do you mean by that? What do you mean, not necessary? What, are you trying to cut ties with me now? Eleanor Vance, I'm warning you. Congratulations. Eleanor cut him off, her eyes filled with scorn. You're going to be a father. Julian released her hand, sinking into the sofa with a flicker of guilt, but then another thought seemed to occur to him, and his brow relaxed. You took your mother away because Chloe is pregnant, didn't you? You're afraid I'll neglect you now that Chloe's pregnant, so you're doing this to get my attention? Eleanor, you don't have to do these things. Even if Chloe has my child, you will always be Julian Sterling's one and only wife. That will never change, not until the day I die. A triumphant smile played on Julian's lips, and he magnanimously pulled a red tourmaline bracelet from his pocket. Eleanor had seen this bracelet on Chloe's social media feed. A one-of-a-kind piece from an auction house. There was only one in the world. Chloe had thought it looked dated, tossed it in the trash, and declared sad smiley only an old woman would like wearing this. Seeing Eleanor staring blankly, Julian assumed she was stunned with surprise and continued with a smile. Since you've put so much effort into pleasing me, you can come to the family gathering at the estate tomorrow. Eleanor frowned, about to refuse. Then Julian asked another strange question. That document you had me sign last time, what were you buying? I never got a spending alert. Her heart skipped a beat, and Eleanor unconsciously clenched her fists. So, he didn't know he had signed a divorce agreement. That was fine. At least when she left, she wouldn't have to get entangled with him again. This thought, Eleanor composed herself and replied perfunctorily, it was nothing. I decided I didn't want it later on. Julian didn't overthink it. Looking at Eleanor's plainly dressed figure, a warmth stirred in his chest. Just as he was about to say something, Chloe's call came through. Julian, darling, the baby's bothering me again. Come over and keep me company. Julian instinctively glanced at Eleanor. If it were before, upon hearing Chloe's words, Eleanor would have certainly thrown a huge fit, demanding he not leave. Or, she might have just pushed him out of the villa and slammed the door with force to declare her displeasure. But this time, Eleanor did nothing. She merely turned and walked silently up the stairs, leaving Julian with only the sight of her slender back. Eleanor. Julian called after her, a sense of inexplicable annoyance rising within him. Didn't you hear me? Chloe wants me to go be with her and the baby. Eleanor nodded, her steps never faltering. Go on, then. Be safe. Julian froze, momentarily dazed. It was Chloe's angry voice that finally pulled him back to his senses, and he hastily replied to her, I'm on my way. On the 10th day of the divorce cooling-off period, Eleanor went to the embassy to apply for a visa to T7 that evening. She arrived at the Sterling family estate on time. The birthday banquet was a grand affair, with guests from all the renowned families in their circle. The Vance family had once been among them. Catherine Sterling used to say, of all the girls in the city, only Eleanor is worthy of our Julian. When Eleanor marries into our family, I will surely treat her like my own daughter. After the Vance family went bankrupt, it was also Catherine, at Eleanor's father's funeral, who had thrown a check for $100,000 in Eleanor's face, warning her to take the money and leave, to not ruin Julian's bright future. Composing herself, Eleanor walked into the old estate. The moment she entered, she felt the strange looks from those around her. They were looks of mockery, disdain, and schadenfreude. In the center of the crowd, Catherine Sterling held Chloe Reed's hand, warmly greeting the guests. "Yes, this is our Julian's love, Chloe Reed. She's 3 months pregnant." Someone deliberately stirred up trouble. "Isn't your daughter-in-law's last name Vance? Parading this one around so openly, aren't you afraid she'll get angry?" Catherine rolled her eyes and spoke with disdain. "What's there to be afraid of? A destitute woman who depends on my son to survive, what is there to fear? If it weren't for my son's kindness in taking her in, who knows which gutter she'd have died in by now. Besides, she's a hen that can't even lay eggs. If she has the ability, she should try having one herself, shouldn't she?" Eleanor had been pregnant once, 3 years ago on the way to the coast, with Julian driving. The brakes failed, causing a multi-car pile dash up in that split second. Eleanor didn't even think twice before shielding Julian with her own body. Glass from the window shattered, embedding itself entirely into Eleanor's skin. She lost consciousness on the spot. She woke up in the hospital. The doctor told her she had been pregnant. She had lost the baby, and it was very likely she would never be able to be a mother again. Hearing this news, Eleanor cried the entire night. But the butler told her that Julian had been rescued by a young woman, that he was very grateful to her and was going to hire her as his assistant at the company. That girl was Chloe Reed. A flash of irony crossed her eyes as Eleanor retreated from the crowd, finding solitude in the back garden to clear her head. But Chloe wouldn't leave her alone. Quietly sidling up to Eleanor's side. "Eleanor, why aren't you inside? Are you afraid you'll burst into tears seeing how well Catherine treats me?" She fluttered her eyelashes, making it clear she was trying to provoke her. "Look, Catherine just gave me this. She said it's a bracelet that all the mistresses of the Sterling house receive. Isn't it beautiful?" Chloe proudly displayed the jade bracelet on her wrist. Eleanor had long since stopped caring. "What is it you really want to say?" "I want to say that Julian doesn't love you anymore, and Catherine can't stand you. So why do you insist on shamelessly clinging to the title of Mrs. Sterling? You should just sensibly step aside and give it to me. Just last night, Julian told me he wants me to stand by his side openly, and that he won't let me or our child suffer any injustice." Chloe's tone was aggressive, but Eleanor just smiled. "Then I congratulate you. The Sterling family, Julian himself, Eleanor Vance had long since let them go." With that, Eleanor turned to leave. Chloe, as if struck by a thought, cried out ouch and fell to the ground. "Someone, help me, my stomach hurts so much." Julian rushed over just in time to see Chloe clutching her stomach, crying out in pain. Almost instinctively, he raised his hand and slapped Eleanor hard across the face. "Eleanor Vance, how can you be so vicious? How could you lay a hand on a pregnant woman?" Eleanor held her cheek, her eyes filled with disappointment. "I didn't do it. I saw it with my own eyes." Julian grabbed Eleanor's wrist, his grip so tight it felt like it could shatter her bones. "Have you forgotten your lesson from last time? If anything happens to Chloe, I swear I'll have your old hag of a mother dug up and her ashes scattered. No need to wait. We can do it right now." Catherine Sterling arrived, fuming, with bodyguards in tow, ordering them to restrain Eleanor. Chloe sobbed and shook her head. "Catherine, Julian, please, let it go. Eleanor didn't mean to do it. She's just jealous that I'm carrying Julian's child. I can understand." She turned her head and suddenly knelt before me. "How about this, Eleanor? You can hit me a couple more times. As long as you're not angry, I'll do anything. I just beg you not to hurt my child." Eleanor almost laughed out of sheer anger. "I told you, I didn't push her. If you don't believe me, there are security cameras in the back garden. One look and you'll know." Chloe's face went pale, and with a sharp intake of breath, she fainted. Julian's rage completely erupted. He dragged Eleanor to the edge of the swimming pool, grabbed her by the hair, and forced her head underwater once, twice. The pool water flooded Eleanor's mouth and nose, choking its way into her lungs. The pain was so intense her vision went black, her throat bled, and her ears rang. On the poolside, Chloe had somehow regained consciousness and was nestled pitifully in Catherine's arms. The surrounding guests whispered among themselves. "Mr. Sterling is being too harsh, isn't he? He's really trying to kill her. Serves her right. Who told her to bully people? Half an hour later, Julian finally let go. He walked over to Chloe, his voice gentle. Don't be afraid, I've got an even for you. Does your stomach still hurt? I'll take you to the hospital. With that, he lifted Chloe into his arms and left without a backward glance. Catherine Sterling kicked Eleanor disdainfully before leaving in a huff. Everyone left. Only Eleanor remained, sprawled on the ground like a dead fish. When her tears had run dry, she looked at the wedding ring on her hand and suddenly began to laugh, a raw, gut-wrenching sound. Taking out her phone, she dialed an unfamiliar number. That offer you made before, to trade $300 million for evidence of the Sterling family's tax evasion, is it still on the table? After that day, Eleanor never went back home. Instead, she lived in a hotel for more than 10 days. During that time, Julian, as a form of punishment, posted daily updates about his life with Chloe on social media. He celebrated Chloe's birthday with her. The gift was a gemstone brooch that Eleanor had always wanted. He moved Chloe into their home. The bedsheets were a pattern Eleanor had personally chosen. He promised to hold a wedding for Chloe. The venue was the same church where he and Eleanor had married. Friends from their circle showered them with blessings, calling them a perfect match of talent and beauty. They said Julian had finally come to his senses and should have kicked out that frumpy Eleanor long ago. Someone even said they should go all the way, not just have a wedding, but divorce Eleanor outright and marry Chloe. That comment was voted to the very top. Julian never replied. The next day, it had been deleted. Eleanor paid no mind to these petty matters, pouring all her energy into her deal with Rhys Prescott. On the 29th day of the divorce cooling-off period, Eleanor returned to the home she had shared with Julian. Unsurprisingly, everything in the house had been changed to suit Chloe's tastes. All of Eleanor's photos and clothes had been cut to shreds. Fortunately, the documents and the divorce agreement hidden in the closet had not been discovered. After securing her documents, Eleanor was about to leave when Chloe, sporting a pregnant belly, blocked the doorway. Eleanor Vance, I didn't expect you to have such high tolerance. You've been degraded into a laughingstock in our entire social circle, yet you still cling desperately to the Sterling family, refusing to leave. But it makes sense. Your father jumped to his death, your mother just died, so of course you have to hold on tight to the Sterling family's lifeline. After all, besides Julian, who else in this city would even look at you? As she spoke, Chloe suddenly thought of something amusing and gave Eleanor an innocent smile. Do you know why Julian adores me so much? Because I told him that on the day of your car accident, you abandoned him to save yourself, and it was me who pulled him from the wreckage. When I took Julian to the hospital, you were still pinned in the passenger seat, with so much blood pooling beneath you. I literally watched you miscarry, you know. And your mother, I was the one who bribed the doctor to tell Julian that it was fine to remove a ventilator from a comatose patient, making you watch your own mother die right in front of you. See, Eleanor, I've done so much. How could you ever hope to win against me? Her handbag dropped to the floor with a thud. Eleanor could finally bear it no longer, raising her hand and slapping Chloe across the face. The next second, a sharp pain struck the back of her neck, and she was knocked unconscious. When she woke up, she and Chloe were both trapped in a car after an accident, just like 3 years ago. The difference was, this time, the person making the choice was Julian. The rescue workers assessed the situation, their faces grim. Mr. Sterling, your wife and Miss Reed are both pinned by the deformed front end of the car. Time is critical. We can only save one of them first. Who do you want us to save? Julian didn't hesitate. Save Eileen. Before he could finish, Chloe clutched her stomach and spoke weakly. Julian, darling, save Eleanor. She's been with you for 7 years, while all I did was save your life once. Choose her. The baby and I will be fine. Julian froze, swallowing the words in his throat. Save Chloe. The rescuer frowned. Mr. Sterling, are you sure? This young lady is only trapped by the airbag. Your wife has her entire leg pinned and is much more severely injured. If things go wrong, it could mean amputation. I said, save Chloe. Julian's words were as cold as ice. Eleanor is my wife. Even if her leg has to be amputated, the Sterling family can support her for the rest of her life. Chloe is different. She saved me. I have to be responsible for her. The rescuer said no more. Picking up his tools to break open the door, Eleanor watched as they carefully rescued Chloe. On the other side of the car, The pressure from the wreckage caused a piece of metal to drive deep into her thigh, and a piercing, bone-deep pain instantly shot through her entire body. In days, she felt as if she had returned to 7 years ago. She had accidentally fallen, and Julian was kneeling before her, gently blowing on the wound. "Eleanor Vance, are you trying to worry me to death?" Now, she was trapped in a car, bleeding profusely. The last thing she saw was the sight of Julian carrying Chloe in his arms, walking away with large strides, his back receding further and further into the distance. Eleanor woke up again in the intensive care unit of the hospital. A doctor was examining her wound, his face full of relief. "It was just 1 millimeter away from hitting your femoral artery. You were lucky to have a strong will to live and to have been sent to the hospital in time. Otherwise, forget your leg, you wouldn't have survived." Eleanor managed a weak smile, but her mind was on the words she had overheard while she was drifting in and out of consciousness. "The patient has lost too much blood. Why hasn't the hospital's blood bank responded yet? Don't even mention it." Mr. Sterling's girlfriend said her stomach hurt, so he ordered the entire hospital blood bank to be locked down. All the blood is to be reserved for his girlfriend, just in case. Isn't that absurd? If the hospital's blood bank can't be used, what about this patient? She'll just have to rely on herself. So Julian really wanted her to die that badly? Perhaps the pain had reached such an extreme that even her heart had grown numb. At this moment, Eleanor couldn't shed a single tear. She was only grateful that their divorce cooling-off period had only a few hours left. That evening, Julian came to see her. His gaze fell on her heavily bandaged thigh, and he stared for a long time before speaking. "Chloe saved my life. I have to be responsible for her." Eleanor didn't speak, only studying the man before her with great seriousness, the man to whom she had given 7 years of her life. She wanted to ask him if he remembered how much he once loved her. She wanted to ask him if he remembered that in that car accident, she had also lost a child for him. She wanted to ask him if he had ever considered what he would do if she had truly died. Eleanor thought of many things, but the words that came to her lips were simply, "I know." She knew he didn't love her. She knew he had never cared about that child. She knew that even if she died, Julian Sterling wouldn't care in the slightest. And she knew, most importantly, that after today, she and Julian Sterling would have no relationship whatsoever. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor spoke slowly. "Julian, let's get div." Her phone suddenly rang, and Chloe's coquettish voice came through the receiver. "Julian, darling, Catherine brought a photographer. She wants to take a family portrait with us, and you're the only one missing." A flicker of panic crossed Julian's face. He instinctively looked toward the hospital bed, only to see Eleanor's closed eyes. She didn't care about him anymore. The thought suddenly surfaced in Julian's mind, but he quickly shook his head. That couldn't be. Eleanor loved him too much, and besides, didn't her mother's survival depend on the Sterling family? At this thought, Julian's expression suddenly softened. "Eleanor, you get some rest. When you're discharged, I'll personally bring your mother back." The door closed, and Eleanor took out her phone, dialing the butler's number. "Bring the bag from my room, the one full of documents, to the hospital." She then sent a message to Rhys Prescott, "Come get me." An hour later, Eleanor had deleted all of Julian's contact information and, in a wheelchair, left the hospital at the same time. Julian, in the middle of a family portrait session, received a notification from his lawyer. "Congratulations, Mr. Sterling. Your divorce from Miss Eleanor Vance is now legally effective." The phone clattered to the floor, startling the jubilant Catherine and Chloe beside him. "Julian, what are you doing? Can't you even hold your phone steady?" "Julian, darling, the photographer is still waiting for you. You can pick up the phone later." Julian paid them no mind, frantically picking up his phone and scanning the lawyer's message over and over again. "Congratulations, Mr. Sterling. Your divorce from Miss Eleanor Vance is now legally effective. From this day forward, you and Miss Eleanor Vance are no longer legally married. You are each free to marry another, with no further connection between you." "No further connection?" Julian muttered the words blankly, his eyes suddenly turning red. He suddenly remembered that year, huddled on the sofa of their rented apartment with Eleanor, excitedly talking about the future. Eleanor had asked him, "Julian, will we ever break up?" Julian had answered with complete confidence, "Of course not. Julian Sterling will never be apart from Eleanor Vance. And Eleanor Vance will never leave Julian Sterling." The words from that day seemed to echo in his ears, but reality delivered a heavy blow. He gripped his phone tightly, about to rush out the door, but Chloe grabbed the corner of his sleeve, her face filled with unease. "Julian, darling, we're about to take the picture." "Where are you going?" Julian's lips tightened as he forcefully pulled his sleeve free. "I'm sorry, we'll have to take the family portrait another time. I need to find Eleanor." "You are not to go." Catherine Sterling blocked Julian's path, her face livid. "I forbid you from going to find that tramp. Don't you forget, if it weren't for her jealous rage, dragging Chloe out for a street race, how would Chloe have gotten into a car accident?" Julian froze, instinctively refuting, "But Eleanor was injured too. The doctor said she was just a fraction of an inch away from." "So what?" Catherine cut him off, her voice as cold as snow. "Don't you forget, the one who rescued you from that car, disregarding her own safety, was Chloe, not Eleanor Vance. If Chloe hadn't arrived in time, you'd be dead. What's more, she is now carrying your child. If anything happens to my precious grandson, I will not spare her." In the past, hearing his mother say this, Julian would have immediately sobered up and pushed all thoughts of Eleanor aside, but now, looking at the undisguised contempt and disgust on his mother's face, Julian felt a sharp pain swell in his chest. After a moment of silence, he spoke, his voice hoarse. "Eleanor divorced me." Catherine's entire body jolted. "What did you say?" Julian closed his eyes, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Eleanor Vance divorced me. I only found out when the lawyer sent the message. We've apparently already passed the cooling-off period." In contrast to Catherine's shock, Chloe nearly dug her nails into her palms until they bled to keep from laughing out loud. 3 years. She had played the part of the meek and subservient woman for 3 years, exhausting every scheme, and now, finally, she had the chance to become Mrs. Sterling in her own right. Suppressing her excitement, Chloe carefully fanned the flames. How could Eleanor do such a thing? Divorce is a major affair. How could she not even tell you, Julian? She clearly has no respect for you at all. Catherine, too, snapped back to reality, a contemptuous curve on her lips. "Chloe is right. It seems to me Eleanor has been thoroughly spoiled by you. To think she could even hide a divorce from us, truly ill-mannered. But I suppose she did one good thing. Julian, you listen to me. Tomorrow, you will go with Chloe to get your marriage license." Chloe's eyes lit up, and she lowered her head shyly. "Catherine, isn't this a bit too fast?" "What's fast about it?" Catherine frowned, slightly irritated by Chloe's provincial demeanor, but thinking of the child in her belly, she softened her tone. "Listen to me. You and Julian should get the license as soon as possible, so my grandchild can have a proper name." Chloe nodded demurely. "Then I'll do as you say, Catherine." With that, she lifted her head and looked at Julian with a shy expression, but what she saw was Julian's distant, unfocused gaze. Her heart skipped a beat, and Chloe, her eyes red-rimmed, prompted him. "Julian, darling." Julian returned to the present, completely unaware of what they had been discussing. Biting her lip, Chloe repeated herself. "Catherine said we should go get our marriage license tomorrow, to give the baby a proper name." She looked at Julian expectantly, waiting for him to agree, but Julian turned his head away, his tone firm. "No what?" Catherine and Chloe spoke in unison. Julian's lips formed a tight, straight line. "My wife will only ever be one person, Eleanor Vance. No one else is worthy." Dropping this statement, he ignored the pale-faced Chloe and the furious Catherine and strode out the door. He understood now that he had been possessed lately, making Eleanor suffer so many grievances. It was only right for Eleanor to be angry. It was his fault. He had forgotten their promise. Now he regretted it. He was going to apologize to Eleanor. Once Eleanor's anger subsided, he would propose to her again, and they would go back to being Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. As for Chloe, he would keep her on the side. After she gave birth to the child, he would have it legally adopted under Eleanor's name, ensuring she wouldn't get too arrogant from his favor. Eleanor would remain the one and only Mrs. Sterling. This thought, Julian couldn't help but curve his lips into a slight smile, feeling as if everything was under his control. Pushing open the door to the empty hospital room, Julian spoke excitedly. "Eleanor, I've come to apologize." His words hung in the air, unanswered. Julian scanned the room and walked toward the bathroom. "Eleanor, are you in there?" "I've come to apologize. What happened yesterday was my fault. I shouldn't have abandoned you for Chloe. Please don't be angry with me anymore, okay? I'm free tomorrow. Let's remarry." Looking at the closed glass door, a helpless smile touched Julian's eyes. "Eleanor, I know you're still angry with me. I was wrong. I shouldn't have let Chloe get pregnant, and I shouldn't have made you suffer so much for her sake. I've had your mother's room kept clean this whole time. Come out, and I'll go with you to bring her back to the hospital." No one responded. Julian frowned, his tone growing impatient. "Eleanor, that's enough. If you keep this up, I might just take back what I just said." "Eleanor." Julian knocked on the door. "Knock, knock. Eleanor. If you don't answer, I'm coming in. Knock, knock. Eleanor, I'm really coming, Mr. Sterling. Hasn't your wife already been discharged?" The head nurse, drawn by the noise, came in and cut Julian off. Julian froze, his heart skipping a beat. "What did you say?" "Eleanor was discharged." "When?" "About half an hour ago. The director himself came to help her with the paperwork since she couldn't move easily. She said something about not liking the smell of hospitals and wanting to recuperate somewhere else." "Oh, right. She also asked me to give this to you. She said you'd understand once you saw it." The head nurse handed Julian a file folder. Inside was a bank card and a signed copy of the divorce agreement. On the back of the bank card, a single line was clearly written: medical expenses. Julian knew this meant Eleanor was determined to sever all ties with him. Without a second to think, he pushed past the nurse and rushed out of the room. He had to find Eleanor. He refused to believe Eleanor could be so heartless. They had been so good together, so very good. How dare she just abandon him like this? As he thought this, the anger in Julian's heart swelled. As he passed a doctor's lounge, he heard someone mention Eleanor Vance's name. He stopped involuntarily, straining to listen. "You won't believe what I just saw downstairs. Rhys Prescott, the CEO of the Prescott Group. He personally carried a woman into his car. Guess who she was?" The nurses erupted in a flurry of disbelief. "Impossible. Mr. Prescott is famous for being aloof with women. Last time, some actress deliberately tried to get close to him at a gala, and he had his bodyguards throw her out on the spot. It was on the gossip sites for 3 days. Exactly. If you said it was Mr. Sterling, we'd believe you, but Mr. Prescott? No way." The first nurse scoffed. "I'm not lying. I saw it clearly with my own eyes. His assistant and bodyguards were right there, but Mr. Prescott acted like they didn't exist and just picked her up himself." A younger nurse pouted, her tone sour. "Probably just some shameless little fox, seducing Mr. Prescott." The other nurse nudged her. "Stop it, I'm serious. Guess who it was? It's either some actress or a socialite from some rich family. It couldn't possibly be Mrs. Sterling, could it?" At that, everyone burst out laughing. Everyone in New York knew that the Sterling and Prescott families were notorious rivals. If one family suffered a setback, the other would publicly beat drums and send celebratory wreaths. This was especially true for the current heads, Rhys Prescott and Julian Sterling. They never failed to cause a scene when they were in the same room. The only time they had coexisted peacefully was at Julian and Eleanor's wedding. Rhys hadn't attended, merely sending a bouquet of dew-kissed white lilies. That very night, Julian announced that no lilies were ever to be planted in the Sterling villa. As the laughter died down, the atmosphere suddenly turned strange, because the nurse who had started the conversation wasn't laughing. Instead, she had an expression that said, "You guessed right." "What?" "It was really Miss Vance. Has the world gone mad? Does Mr. Sterling know? Of course he doesn't know. If he did, he'd charge over to the Prescott estate to settle scores, and Miss Vance wouldn't get off easy either. It might even lead to a divorce." Every whispered word reached Julian's ears, but he stood as if frozen, his mind endlessly replaying one phrase. Rhys Prescott personally carried Eleanor into his car. Rhys Prescott? Eleanor Vance. How could they be together? Suddenly, Julian thought of the divorce agreement, and his pupils contracted sharply. Could it be that Eleanor is serious? Not daring to think further, Julian immediately pulled out his phone and dialed Eleanor's number. The first call, the second. It wasn't until the 19th call that someone finally answered. Julian's voice was choked with tears. "Eleanor, they said you left with Rhys Prescott. Are you still angry with me? I truly know I was wrong this time. Please forgive me, okay? Where are you? I'll come pick you up." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then a voice, as cold and clear as snow, came through. "This is Rhys Prescott." The hand holding the phone instantly bulged with veins, and Julian heard himself speak through gritted teeth. "Who gave you permission to answer Eleanor's phone?" "That's my wife. Have some decency, Prescott." The man let out a soft laugh, his tone unhurried. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but I'm afraid I can't comply. Also, a friendly reminder, your divorce from Miss Vance became legally effective an hour ago. In the eyes of the law, you now have no whatsoever relationship. With that, the call was immediately disconnected. When he tried to call back, he found he had been blocked. Julian cursed under his breath, nearly crushing the phone in his hand, but he quickly composed himself and called his assistant, telling him to immediately investigate all interactions between Eleanor and Rhys Prescott. He didn't believe Eleanor would betray him. The only possibility was that she was truly heartbroken, so she was colluding with Rhys in an act to deliberately provoke him. At this thought, Julian added another instruction: that estate in the southern part of the city, buy it. Put it in my wife's name. The assistant hesitated for a moment before asking quietly, which wife? Julian froze, on the verge of erupting in anger, but then he heard his assistant continue, Sir, you previously instructed us to refer to Miss Reed as the second lady in private. Is the estate in the south for Miss Vance or for Miss Reed? Julian was paralyzed. He had no memory of ever saying such a thing. Yet he suddenly recalled last Valentine's Day because Chloe liked pink. He had specifically bought a couture gown for her as a gift, but the gift was delayed, and instead, at the banquet the next day, it was Eleanor who appeared wearing that very pink gown. He remembered Chloe crying pitifully that day, saying that if her older sister Eleanor liked it, she was willing to give up anything for her. He remembered his own towering rage. How he had splashed red wine on Eleanor's face in front of everyone, telling her to take a good look in the mirror and stop competing with Chloe for everything. And Eleanor, she had stared at him blankly, her smile more painful than tears. She had said, Julian Sterling, the label on this dress says it's for Mrs. Sterling. She had said, if I had known this dress was for Chloe Reed, I would have died before putting it on. So that time, it truly had been a misunderstanding. But why hadn't Eleanor said anything? He had so many things to deal with every day, it was normal for him to forget things occasionally. Julian tried to come up with numerous excuses for himself, attempting to cover up the panic rising in his heart, but the more he justified, the more agitated he felt. In the end, he could only mutter a single sentence: from now on, there is only one Mrs. Sterling, and that is Eleanor Vance. And then he hung up. Meanwhile, Eleanor was undergoing an examination by the medical team from Rhys's family enterprise. Rhys walked in and spoke, seemingly casually. Julian Sterling called you just now. He was being unpleasant, so I blocked him for you. Is that okay? Eleanor froze, not quite processing his words. Rhys's hand holding the phone tightened, his smile not reaching his eyes. What? You still care about that animal? I can call him back for you if you'd like. Though he said that, Rhys's eyes had already turned chillingly cold. Eleanor belatedly shook her head. No need. We're divorced anyway. If he's blocked, he's blocked. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but after she said that, the atmosphere in the room instantly warmed up. Rhys settled back onto the sofa, his long legs casually crossed, once again resuming his gentlemanly, jade-like demeanor. I've already submitted the evidence you provided. The investigation will take some time. For now, just focus on recovering here. I'll notify you if anything comes up. Eleanor was surprised. Here? You want me to stay at the Prescott estate? Aren't you afraid Julian will come looking for trouble? She knew that Rhys had always hated trouble. The first banquet Eleanor attended after marrying into the Sterling family, she had accidentally witnessed Rhys being pestered by a girl. His reason for shooing her away was, Julian Sterling has already told you, I despise everyone associated with him. And as Julian's former wife, Rhys should despise her even more, right? At this thought, Eleanor spoke awkwardly. I think I should probably leave on my own. You can call me anytime if anything comes up. With that, she began to wheel herself away. She had only moved a few feet when a pair of strong hands firmly held her wheelchair in place. Rhys's cool, deep voice sounded, Eleanor Vance, must you be so distant with me? Eleanor sighed and uttered the name that had been buried for so long. Rhys, my brother. Unlike the Sterling and Prescott families, who were like fire and water, the Vance family had always remained neutral. Rhys had been a part of the first 15 years of her life. It wasn't until she was 16 that Rhys went abroad for his heirs training, and he was gone for 8 years. The next time they met was at Julian's wedding, where Eleanor, dressed in a white veil, married the man she thought was her happiness. No one knew how much Rhys drank that night. He had thought he would never have the chance to get close to the moon again. He never imagined that the man who had stolen the moon would, with his own hands, push her away. Looking at Eleanor's pale face, Rhys let out a helpless sigh. Stay here. I'm begging you. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to say it wasn't necessary, that she was long used to being alone. She wanted to say this wasn't right, that she didn't want to trouble him, but as the words reached her lips, Eleanor's mind suddenly flashed back to when she was 15. Devastated that Rhys was going abroad, she had hidden in her room, crying her eyes out, and no one could console her. In the end, it was Rhys who leaned against her door with her favorite strawberry cake and said, Ellie, please don't cry. I'm begging you. The past and present merged, and Eleanor suddenly broke down. She threw herself into Rhys's arms, her cries raw and heart-wrenching. Why were you gone for so long? Why didn't you come back sooner? If you hadn't left me, Julian and I. She didn't finish her sentence, but Rhys's eyes had already turned red. He had, in fact, returned secretly once, but by then, it was already too late. After that, disheartened, he forced himself to stop paying attention to Eleanor and shifted his career focus abroad. He never imagined that in the places he couldn't see, Eleanor had suffered so much. For the next 2 weeks, Eleanor stayed at Rhys's villa. Julian, however, went mad, not only creating trouble for the Prescott family in the business world at every turn, but also constantly applying pressure, trying to force Rhys to hand Eleanor over. He was even willing to give up the latest technology developed by the Sterling Group to achieve this. Upon hearing this news, Catherine immediately summoned Julian back to the estate and, in front of all the servants, slapped him hard across the face. For a woman, how far will you let this madness go? Not only is Eleanor already divorced from you, but even if you did manage to win her back, with her ambiguous relationship with Rhys Prescott, I would never let her set foot in the Sterling house again. Also, Chloe thought you had abandoned her and cried for days. The doctor said a pregnant woman's emotions should not fluctuate. If this continues, it won't be good for the child in her belly. At the mention of the child, Julian's cold expression softened slightly. The baby, is it okay? Seeing his reaction, Catherine smiled with relief. The baby is fine, but if Chloe continues to be this sad, there will surely be problems later on. Mom knows you like Eleanor, that you can't let her go. But Chloe is innocent. She saved your life, and now she's carrying your child. Even if it's just for the sake of that life debt, you can't treat her poorly. How about this? Chloe should still be at the villa. Go back and comfort her. As for Eleanor, when she comes to her senses, we can talk about it then. Julian accepted his mother's words and had the driver take him back to the villa. However, Chloe, who was supposed to be at home grieving, was not there. The house was empty. Frowning, Julian immediately contacted his assistant. Check Chloe Reed's schedule for today. 10 minutes later, the assistant replied, Miss Reed is at the Starlight Bar. She invited her friends for a get-together today and has been there for 3 hours. Julian froze. A bar? Can a pregnant woman drink alcohol? But Catherine had clearly said that Chloe had been in low spirits these past few days. How could she be in the mood to invite friends to a party? He clutched his phone, immediately heading out and ordering the driver to go to the bar. Just as he was about to enter, a bartender blocked his way. Sorry, sir, the bar has been booked for a private event today. We're not open to the public. Julian paused and explained simply, I'm here to find someone. I'll be out shortly. The bartender sneered. Sorry, sir. Miss Reed has given instructions that she's having a party with her friends today and no one is to disturb them. If anyone tries to force their way in, we are to have them thrown out. She'll cover the medical expenses. Julian was stunned, unable to believe that these were words Chloe would say. He remembered that Chloe detested it when the rich threw their weight around. Previously, when Eleanor was maliciously shoved by paparazzi and scraped her knee, she had wanted the bodyguards to stop them and call the police. It was Chloe who had stepped forward and righteously declared, paparazzi are people too, they're just trying to do their jobs. Eleanor, even though you're very rich, you can't bully these ordinary working people, can you? At the time, he had only thought Chloe was kind and blamed Eleanor for being petty. But now, Julian's lips formed a tight line. He signaled for his bodyguards to move the bartender aside and rushed into the bar alone. Just around a corner, he heard the sound of Chloe and her friends laughing and talking. Chloe, you're amazing. Not only did you make Julian Sterling fall at your feet, but you also pushed out his childhood sweetheart of a wife. TSK, Your methods are truly impressive. Her friend's voice was a mix of envy and teasing. Chloe let out a self-satisfied humph. That's nothing. The Sterlings are just too stupid. They believe anything I say. A fake life-saving story was all it took to make Julian give me his heart and soul. Julian's steps froze. Her friend was surprised. The life-saving story was fake? But you were the one who took Julian to the hospital, right? So what? Chloe sneered. When I found Julian, he was perfectly fine, just looked a bit scary. That idiot Eleanor, pregnant and still insisted on shielding Julian, taking all the damage for him. So, I had no choice but to dump Eleanor by the side of the road and deliberately made a few cuts on Julian to make everyone think Eleanor was a coward who ran for her life, making me the Sterling family's savior. You have no idea how satisfying it was to see the look of despair in Eleanor's eyes when she woke up and learned that I had saved Julian and that she had lost her baby. Julian felt as if he had been struck by lightning. Just as he was about to rush out and confront her, he heard Chloe's friend ask another question. Hey, you should drink less. Aren't you pregnant? You can't drink alcohol. Chloe's voice was light and airy. Oh, my belly? That's fake too. It's all because Eleanor wouldn't let go of her position as Mrs. Sterling. If I didn't provoke her a little, how would she ever give up and leave on her own? And Julian's mother, she's another old fool. I just had to frame Eleanor and complain about a stomach ache, and that old hag was tripping over herself to stand up for me. It's hilarious. Every word was like a poisoned blade, stabbing through the image of the innocent, kind, and pure young woman in Julian's memory, leaving it completely disfigured. The bodyguard asked tremblingly, Mr. Sterling, are we still going in? Julian closed his eyes and turned to leave. Don't let her know I was here. Inside the old estate, Julian poured himself one glass of liquor after another. He thought about what Chloe had said earlier. She had falsely claimed Eleanor's act of saving his life, all in a desperate bid to marry into wealth. She had abandoned a pregnant Eleanor on the side of the road, causing her to lose her chance at motherhood. She had faked a pregnancy, framed Eleanor, and forced her out of the Sterling family. In his drunken haze, Julian remembered the night of the gathering at the estate. He remembered Eleanor's trembling body as she was scorned by everyone. He remembered her eyes, always so beautiful, filled with disappointment in that moment. So, she had endured so many grievances all these years. The liquor went down his throat, tasting only of bitterness. Julian, losing control, pulled out his phone, wanting to call Eleanor. He longed to hear her voice, even if it was just to curse him. But just as he unlocked the screen, Chloe called. Hello? Julian, darling, it's my birthday tomorrow. What are you planning to get me? On the phone, Chloe was as innocent and cheerful as ever. A cold glint appeared in Julian's eyes, and he was about to shatter her hateful facade. Then he heard Chloe continue. Catherine just called me. She said that since I'm carrying the first grandchild of the Sterling family, it's a very special occasion. So she wants to throw a birthday banquet for me at the estate tomorrow night. Julian, darling, can I invite Eleanor? The hand holding the glass paused. Eleanor? Yes. Even though Eleanor and you are divorced, she is still my senior, in a way. I'm sure she would come. Chloe's voice was sickeningly sweet, laced with an unconcealable malice. She had finally managed to convince Catherine to publicly acknowledge her status tomorrow night, to announce her as the next Mrs. Sterling. How could such a perfect opportunity pass without Eleanor's attendance? She could hardly wait to see Eleanor's devastated and heartbroken expression. Chloe curled her lips, her eyes glinting with cunning. Julian paid her no mind. His thoughts were on the repeatedly blocked calls to Eleanor over the past 2 weeks. He thought of the days he had spent waiting in vain outside the Prescott estate. Yes, if possessed, he said fine. As long as he could see Eleanor, he was willing to endure it. And besides, he thought back to the conversation he had overheard that afternoon, and an idea slowly solidified in his mind. If he did this, perhaps Eleanor would forgive him. Taking a deep breath, he summoned his assistant. Investigate all of Chloe Reed's personal connections and her entire life story. Tomorrow night, I'm going to give her a very special gift. That evening, the Prescott estate received an invitation personally delivered by Julian Sterling. The birthday banquet for the future daughter-in-law of the Sterling family was an affair of staggering opulence. The entire estate was transformed into a medieval palace, with crystal chandeliers refracting dazzling light, waiters weaving through the crowd with champagne, and an orchestra playing elegant classical music. Nearly every person of note in the city had come, all eager to see for themselves. Just how beautiful the woman was who was rumored to have so captivated the Sterling heir that he had driven away his own wife on the second floor of the banquet hall. Chloe Reed, dressed in a high-end custom gown, made her entrance surrounded by a flock of her closest friends. "Oh my God. This is on another level," a friend exclaimed with dramatic flair. "This is the Sterling family, after all. Just these fresh flowers must be worth a fortune, right?" Chloe lifted her chin proudly, basking in the adoration of the crowd. "Just a trifle. Do you see this blue sapphire brooch on my chest? There are only 2 in the entire world. The other one belongs to Princess Sophia." Her friends gasped, their eyes wide with awe. Then, one of them, struck by a thought, asked curiously, "But I thought you hated the color blue? Why would Mr. Sterling give you a blue sapphire?" Chloe's expression froze for a second. "Who says I don't like blue? Blue is my favorite color now." The friend didn't press further, instead pointing down the hallway with an excited shriek. "Chloe, look. Mr. Sterling is coming." Chloe reveled in the moment, putting on a perfectly sweet smile. "Julian, darling, do you like my dress?" For this banquet, Chloe had woken up at the crack of dawn to prepare. Every detail, from the strands of her hair to the tips of her toes, was meticulously styled, making her look 10 times more beautiful than usual. But Julian didn't spare her a single glance. He simply held a cigarette, his gaze fixed heavily on the entrance to the estate. He treated them all as if they were heir. The atmosphere instantly turned awkward, and the smile on Chloe's face nearly collapsed. Just as she was about to speak, her voice trembling with hurt, a commotion arose from outside. The Prescott family's car had pulled up to the entrance. When the Prescott family's car pulled up to the entrance, Julian practically flew down the stairs. "Watch your head." Rhys gently opened the car door, carefully helping Eleanor out. She hadn't put much effort into her appearance today, just a touch of light makeup, and even her gown was a simple white one. But years of refined living had endowed her with a presence that still made her the most captivating person at the banquet. "Eleanor, you came." Seeing the person he had longed for appear before him, Julian suddenly found himself stumbling over his words. In contrast, Eleanor was poised and graceful. "Millimeter, congratulations." With that one word, the glowing tip of Julian's cigarette burned his fingers. "Eleanor, you've misunderstood. This birthday party is actually just my..." "Julian, darling." Chloe cut him off, flying over like a little bird. She gripped Julian's arm tightly, as if to declare her ownership. "Eleanor, long time no see. Is this your boyfriend?" Looking at Rhys, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit and exuding an air of nobility that surpassed even Julian's, Chloe could barely conceal the envy in her eyes. She deliberately raised her voice. "Eleanor, please don't be offended by what I'm about to say, but you and Julian have been divorced for less than 2 weeks. How did you manage to find a new partner so quickly? Anyone who didn't know better might think that you were already involved before the marriage ended." She paused, as if realizing she had misspoken, and looked at Rhys with a pitiful expression. "I'm so sorry, sir. I'm not very good with words. Please don't let me affect your relationship with Eleanor." Rhys raised an eyebrow, glanced at Julian's face, which was now a fluctuating mix of pale and livid, and his thin lips parted. "This is what you like?" At his words, the expressions on both Julian's and Chloe's faces froze. Eleanor couldn't help but let out a small laugh, then took Rhys's arm and walked into the grand hall. The real show was yet to begin. As she entered, the expressions on everyone's faces were a sight to behold. They probably never expected that Eleanor, who they imagined to be a scorned wife, spending her days in tears, would appear today looking so radiant, and with the even more distinguished air of the Prescott family by her side. Strange glances repeatedly swept over Eleanor, as if trying to strip her bare, inside and out. But Eleanor seemed oblivious, engrossed in her conversation with Rhys. Halfway through the banquet, Rhys was cornered by a business associate he knew. Eleanor went to the garden alone for some fresh air. A month ago, it was here that she had been humiliated by Julian in front of everyone. Nearly dying, Julian appeared silently behind her, his eyes bloodshot, as if he hadn't had a proper rest in a long time. "Eleanor." Eleanor turned, her gaze calm. "Long time no see." Her gaze stung Julian, and his voice came out unbelievably hoarse. "Were you waiting for me on purpose?" Eleanor smiled, neither confirming nor denying it. "Congratulations to you. You finally got what you wanted. When are you planning the wedding? It'll be harder to fit into a wedding dress once her belly gets bigger." She smiled with an ease that suggested she had never shed a tear over the man in front of her. Julian's breath caught in his throat, and it took him a long moment to find his voice. I'm not going to marry her. His voice was low and gravelly, as if suppressing a multitude of emotions. Chloe isn't pregnant. The baby is fake. And she never saved me. The person who pulled me back from the brink of death 3 years ago was you, Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, let's stop this game, okay? Eleanor's pupils trembled, and she subconsciously touched her flat stomach. There had once been a life there. How could they just stop? Seeing her stunned silence, Julian thought she didn't believe him and pressed on urgently. I've already investigated everything. All that stuff before was just Chloe deliberately framing you and driving a wedge between us. I was never in love with her. I was just angry that I loved you so much, yet when we were in danger, you abandoned me. But I've thought it through. Even if you did abandon me, I still can't stop loving you. Eleanor, please forgive me, okay? Let's go back to how we were before. We can move back into our old little apartment. You can make me tomato and egg noodles, and I'll remind you to wear your shoes. We can lie on the sofa on rainy days and watch TV together. That show we never finished, let's finish it together, okay? With every word Julian spoke, a sharp pain shot through Eleanor's heart. All the past grievances, all the suffering, he thought a simple forgive me could just wipe it all away. Eleanor suddenly smiled, but her eyes were ice cold. Have you forgotten? The apartment, you gave it to Chloe. The tomato and egg noodles, you said you were sick of them. Reminding me to wear shoes. At that banquet, you said I wasn't fit to wear Chloe's dress. I was dragged out by bodyguards and walked barefoot from the suburbs back to the city. The gravel tore my feet to shreds, leaving a trail of bloody footprints. And where were you then? You were holding Chloe, introducing her to all your friends. Eleanor lifted her head, wiping away a tear. That TV show. I finished it a long time ago. And I never want to watch it again. Her every word was like a knife, twisting into Julian's heart. By the end, he could barely stand, able only to clench his fists so tightly that his nails dug deep into his palms. I'm sorry. His voice was raspy, his eyes rimmed with red. Eleanor, I'm begging you, please give me another chance. He spoke rapidly, as if afraid of being interrupted. I've already had people investigate the truth of what happened back then. I've also made a list of everyone who bullied you before and retaliated against them, all in the name of the Sterling family. And Chloe. I won't let her off either. You can hit her, you can curse her, whatever you want. But you can't leave me. Don't you remember? When you were homeless on the streets, it was I who took you in. I gave you a home. And your mother, the ICU costs tens of thousands a day, and I was the one who paid for it. Eleanor, have you forgotten all of that? I haven't forgotten. Eleanor suddenly erupted. She looked down, her gaze fixed on her own left hand. It was as if she could still feel the chilling cold of the morgue on the day her mother died. Julian Sterling. My mother, she's dead. She died on the day you had the doctors remove her breathing tube. The world seemed to stand still in that moment. Julian opened his mouth to speak, but instead, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. She's dead? How is that possible? Eleanor, don't joke like that. This isn't a funny joke. How could she possibly be dead? She can't be dead. She can't be. Julian shook his head frantically, but his mind uncontrollably replayed the first time he met Eleanor's mother. He had run away from home, unable to bear his own mother's control. That day, a torrential rain fell on the city, and at 17, he was running through the downpour, crying. It was Eleanor's mother who first noticed him and took him home. He remembered her giving him a glass of warm milk, drying his hair, and saying gently, "Don't be afraid. Just get a good night's sleep." That was the first time he had ever felt the warmth of a home. That was why, when he later heard that the Vance family had gone bankrupt and that Eleanor and her mother had nowhere to go, he had recklessly fought with his own family, insisting on finding her. He remembered on his wedding day, holding Eleanor's hand and willingly calling out the word Mom. That gentle woman, the woman who had brought such warmth into his life, he had personally had her killed. Julian's eyes were blood red, his heart aching to the point of suffocation. He finally understood why Eleanor wanted a divorce. Why she refused to see him again. He knew that he and Eleanor would never reconcile. He had truly, with his own hands, lost Eleanor for good. Julian coughed up another mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground. Eleanor watched this scene quietly and spoke softly. Julian Sterling, if I could do it all over again, I would wish I had never met you." With that, she turned and walked away, just as Julian had left her with nothing but his back so many times before. Outside the garden, Rhys had been waiting for a long time. "Did you make things clear?" Rhys raised his hand, tenderly wiping away a single, undried tear from the corner of her eye. Eleanor sniffled, her smile light and relieved. "It's all clear now. From now on, Julian Sterling won't have the nerve to bother me again." "Thank you, Rhys. When is the investigation team arriving? We should be making our exit." Rhys lifted his hand and glanced at his watch. "Soon. They should be on their way now. I'll go to the entrance to check. Do you want to come with me?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, there are too many people out there. It's too much for me. I'll wait for you here." "All right." After Rhys left, Eleanor prepared to sit in a nearby pavilion. She had just sat down when she heard Chloe, with her friends in tow, rushing over aggressively. "Eleanor Vance. You bitch. Why did Julian say the party is cancelled? Did you say something bad about me again? Or did you shamelessly seduce him again? How can you be so cheap?" Chloe's face was contorted with rage, looking as if she wanted to tear Eleanor to shreds. "You just have the advantage of knowing Julian longer than I have, don't you? So what? I'm still the one carrying his child, unlike you, who probably can't have children for the rest of your life, can you?" Eleanor sneered. It seemed Chloe still didn't know that her secret was out. She stood up, about to speak. Chloe caught a glimpse of Catherine Sterling and her entourage heading their way and, her eyes darting, decided to pull the same trick again. She grabbed Eleanor's hand and rolled down the pavilion steps. It hurts so much. My stomach hurts so much." Chloe's friends immediately followed suit, their faces pale with feigned horror as they screamed, "Someone, help." Eleanor Vance pushed Chloe down the step. Catherine Sterling and the guests immediately rushed over. It was the same scene all over again. Upon seeing Catherine, Chloe's eyes immediately reddened as she clutched her stomach, looking utterly pitiful. "Catherine, I was just trying to advise Eleanor to know her place. To not debase herself and associate with unsavory characters just to spite Julian. I never expected Eleanor to get so angry. She actually said she never loved Julian and pushed me down the steps, saying she wanted to end the Sterling family line. Catherine, I'm so scared, boo-hoo-hoo-hoo." Chloe's friends also started wiping away tears. "That's right, Catherine, we all saw it with our own eyes. Chloe is such a kind girl, and she was berated so horribly by this Miss Vance." "Exactly. Miss Vance even said that Chloe's baby was a bastard child who would grow up to be a menace to society, and that Chloe must have an abortion. Catherine, our Chloe is so pitiful. You must not let this assailant get away with it." The surrounding guests all shook their heads. "This woman is too wicked. Last time she almost hurt Mr. Sterling's child, and this time she's even more outrageous. No wonder Mr. Sterling wanted to divorce her. Marrying such a vicious woman must be the worst kind of luck. Isn't that the truth? The lesson Mr. Sterling gave her last time was too light. She needs to be punished properly. But she's also quite pitiful, with the mistress getting pregnant. Pitiful people must have their own hateful qualities. If she were good enough, why would Mr. Sterling cheat on her?" The crowd chattered, one after another, all siding with Chloe. Rage surged in Catherine's heart, and she raised her hand to strike. "Stop. Mom, you can't hit her." From outside the crowd, two tense male voices called out at the same time, but Eleanor was faster than both of them. She seized Catherine's hand and forcefully flung it aside. "Julian and I are already divorced. Catherine, you have no right to hit me." Everyone thought Eleanor had lost her mind. This was Julian Sterling's mother, a renowned and formidable socialite in the city. In the past, no matter how Catherine insulted Eleanor, she would always lower her head and bite her tongue, never daring to utter a word of complaint. But now? Chloe was also stunned. She had thought Eleanor was still the same foolish woman she could easily frame. When had she become so assertive? Could it be that she really no longer wanted to reconcile with Julian? The atmosphere turned strangely tense. Catherine, feeling she had lost face, gritted her teeth. "Someone, seize this bitch and tie her up." "Who dares?" Rhys emerged from the crowd, shielding Eleanor behind him. "Eleanor Vance is the most important guest of the Prescott family. If you want to touch her, Mrs. Sterling, I'm afraid you don't have the authority." Julian also pushed through the guests, calling out anxiously, "Mom, I won't let you hurt Eleanor." Their identical displays of protection stunned everyone. Appraising glances darted back and forth. Chloe was practically mad with jealousy, shooting venomous glares at Eleanor. Catherine was even more furious at her son's disappointing behavior. Julian, you've truly lost your mind. Chloe is carrying your child, and yet you still protect this bitch who hurt her. If anything happens to my precious grandson, I will surely. Julian roared, Chloe is not pregnant. His words were like a clap of thunder on a clear day, shocking everyone into stillness. Chloe's friends, in particular, almost instantly let go of her hands, trying to retreat unnoticed. Catherine was also stunned. Impossible. I've seen Chloe's prenatal reports myself. They're from our Sterling. Chloe bribed the obstetrician. My assistant has already found out. Julian's voice was strained as he produced a folder his assistant had just delivered. Not only did Chloe fake her pregnancy, but she also falsely took credit for saving my life from Eleanor, and has been using the Sterling family name to throw her weight around. Here, this is all the evidence. Ignoring Chloe's deathly pale face, Catherine swiftly snatched the folder from him. A moment later, she violently threw several documents at Chloe. The sharp edges of the paper sliced a thin, bloody line across Chloe's face, but she didn't dare to wipe it away. Instead, she glanced frantically at the documents and knelt on the ground, begging for mercy. Catherine, I was wrong. I just love Julian too much, that's all. I didn't mean to deceive you. Julian, darling, please say something for me. Don't you love me the most? Julian closed his eyes and produced another stack of photographs. Without him having to say a word, Catherine immediately snatched them. A single glance was enough to nearly make Catherine faint. Then, she immediately raised her hands and slapped Chloe more than a dozen times, back and forth. You little whore. In the photos, Chloe was dressed in a sexy short skirt, snuggling up to different men. Some were wealthy businessmen in their 50s, others were notorious playboys. The most glaring one was of her on her tiptoes, planting a kiss on the cheek of a married business tycoon, her eyes full of calculation. I thought you were just a bit scheming, but at least you were clean. I never imagined you were playing such games behind our backs. Pa. You little whore. Someone, rip the clothes off her. She's not worthy of wearing anything from my Sterling family. The bodyguards immediately obeyed, and in a flurry of hands, they quickly stripped Chloe of her gown until she was completely bare. She could only curl up on the ground like a dog, trying to cover herself. As for her friends, Catherine didn't spare them either. She had them tied up as well and thrown out by the bodyguards. The dramatic turn of events left the guests speechless for a long time. Even as she was dragged far away, Chloe's heart-wrenching screams could still be heard. Catherine, Julian, darling, I know I was wrong. I'll never do it again. Gag her. Catherine was seething. Her eyes fell on Eleanor's cold, indifferent face, and she couldn't resist a sneer. Are you satisfied now? The Sterling family has become a laughingstock. But don't you get too proud, Eleanor Vance. Even without that bitch Chloe, there are plenty of good girls lining up to marry into our Sterling family. It will never be your turn. Mom. Julian tried to intervene, but a sharp glare from his mother silenced him, and he could only cast apologetic looks at Eleanor. Eleanor took in this scene and found it laughable. How had she never noticed before that Julian was such a mama's boy? Or had her love for him been such a thick filter that it had blinded her? Noticing Julian's pleading eyes, Catherine let out a deep sigh and said, as if making a great concession, fine. Seeing as Julian is so infatuated with you, I can take a step back. You cut all ties with the Prescott family, and I will allow you to be Julian's mistress. Remember, just a mistress. Anything else, don't even think about it. Eleanor truly wanted to laugh out of anger. Did Catherine think Julian Sterling was some kind of grand prize? What gave her the right to be so picky? Rest assured, even if Julian knelt on the ground and begged me, I would never get back together with him. Also, Eleanor paused, her gaze sweeping past the crowd to land on the large group of police officers heading their way. She couldn't hide the smile on her face. Catherine, you have visitors. The crowd turned. A team of well-trained officers ran in swiftly, completely surrounding the estate. We have received a report of severe tax evasion by the Sterling Group. Upon verification, the situation has been confirmed. We are now seizing the assets of the Sterling Group. We ask for your cooperation with the investigation. Snap. Catherine broke one of her meticulously manicured nails. Arrest, evidence collection, sentencing. The entire process took only 15 days. Eleanor watched as the color drained from Julian's face. Inch by inch she watched as Catherine, who had always been so incredibly arrogant, was led away with her hair in disarray, looking as pathetic as a common shrew. She watched as the great mountain of the Sterling family, which had oppressed her for 7 years, came crashing down with a deafening roar, all because of her. As for Chloe, Rhys had collected evidence of her bribing the doctor and causing the death of Eleanor's mother. She was also taken away and sentenced to death with a reprieve in court. Julian looked as if all his life force had been drained away. Overnight, he seemed to have aged 20 years. Because Catherine had not been directly involved in the Sterling Group's affairs, she was only stripped of all her assets. 10 days later, unable to accept the loss of her privileged life and her new status as one of the lower-class people she had always despised, she leaped from the top of the Sterling Group building. When the news reached Julian, he had just been sentenced to 20 years in prison. He went mad on the spot, endlessly repeating phrases like "I'm sorry" and "I regret it." Unfortunately, no one cares about the words of a madman. 3 years later, in New York City, the jewelry brand founded by Eleanor Vance officially launched. On the same day, Julian, having suffered a complete mental breakdown, committed suicide in prison. When the news arrived, Eleanor got blindingly drunk for the first time. Leaning against her balcony, crying and laughing, she realized she could no longer remember what Julian looked like. She realized that the emotions that had once torn her apart seemed to have faded into just another unremarkable scene in the long river of her memories. She realized that even someone she had once loved so passionately, when thought of years later, was nothing more than a familiar yet distant name. Her 7 years of heart-wrenching pain were, in fact, truly worthless. She laughed for a long time. The next day, she woke up from her drunken stupor to a beautiful, sunny day. At her door, she found a bouquet of dew-kissed lilies. The wind blew gently, carrying away all her unbearable memories. She thought to herself that it was truly time for a new beginning. Julian Sterling, goodbye.